Unity, unity, unity. Unity, Western Cape, Ixesha lisondele, unity, unity, Western Cape, Ixesha.
Unity, unity, Makabane, Ixesha. Unity, unity, Makabane, Ixesha. Awuphakama, Makabane, Ixesha. Awuphakama, Makabane, Ixesha. Our unity, unity, Makabane, Ixesha. Oh, unity, unity, Makabane, Ixesha. Awuphakama, action committees, Ixesha. Awuphakama, Makabane, Ixesha. Oh, unity, Makabane, Ixesha. Oh, unity, Makabane, Ixesha. Oh, unity, Makabane, Ixesha. Awuphakama, muntu omusha, Ixesha. Awuphakama, muntu omusha, Ixesha. Awuphakama,
Roll, young lion, roll! Roll, young lion, roll! Roll, young lion, roll! Hey!
Awuphakama, muntu omusha, Ixesha.
Roll, young lion, roll! Roll, young lion, roll! You say no to capitalism, no!
Awuphakama, muntu omusha, Ixesha. Awuphakama, muntu omusha, Ixesha. Oh, unity, Badabasha, Ixesha. Oh, unity, Makabane, Ixesha.
Viva women speak, viva! Iti Makabane. Roll, young lion, roll, roll, roll! Sondele, hey, unity Makabane. Oh, Ixesha lisondele.
Awuphakama, muntu omusha, Ixesha. Awuphakama, muntu omusha, Ixesha. Awuphakama, musha ixesha. How unity maqabane ixesha.
Viva to our Women's League, viva! Viva to the Women's League, viva!
Viva!
Viva Tonka, viva! Viva the youth of South Africa, viva!
Viva!
Viva the youth of Africa, viva!
Viva! Away to... Shall we start? Yes. Greetings, comrades. Can you hear me?
Alo somdana siyo ye.
Comrades from Cape Town. Comrades from Cape Town. Can we please start the session? We know we've been delaying and we've been enjoying the music on the side. Shall we start? Are comrades ready? Can we see on the... Okay.
Maurice, are you host now? Maurice? Are you host?
Yes. Greetings, comrades, greetings, and welcome to the session. Sending love and solidarity from Dakar. I wish I was there. I can feel the spirit. We just listen to your music, to the song there, and I feel like I'm at home. Yeah, it's amazing. But comrades, today we will be joined by different countries. So specifically, we have comrades on the line from South Africa. We have a comrade from Thailand and a comrade from Zimbabwe. And other comrades are obviously joining us from different places. So we welcome them all and we thank you all for joining us on the session. The topic of the session is expanding civic spaces, state repression of water rights claiming. So we all know how that goes. We all know what we go through in our communities when we are pushing back, when we are fighting against the privatization of water. And this session is for us to talk about it in solidarity and also how we can work together and how we can find ways to move beyond the repression that we're being exposed to. So I'm just going to introduce you to my comrade. Just forgive us, the technicality has thrown us off a little bit, and maybe just to say thank you for your time. I know we've been late and comrades have been busy there in Cape Town since this morning already, and we are a few hours late. So thank you so much for your patience, comrades. We appreciate it. I'm introducing to you Comrade Alana Potter. She is the International Coordinator for End Water Poverty, a global civil society coalition with over 120 members in 90 countries. End Water Poverty leads the hashtag Claim Water Rights campaign. She has worked in socio-economics rights research and advocacy for 25 years. And just also to say that you are there in Cape Town because End Water Poverty made it possible. So viva End Water Poverty, and I'll hand over to Alana. Thank you, comrades.
Greetings, comrades and friends. It's wonderful to be here. My job is to give a very brief introduction, and then I'm going to hand back to Faeza to introduce the panel from Zimbabwe, from Thailand, and from Cape Town, where you are. So mine is just to sort of talk a little bit about the broad issues, right? On Monday was Human Rights Day in South Africa. And Ndufuda Kwazi, our comrades there in Cape Town, they said something so interesting. They said, without human rights defenders, there are no human rights. And this was around the commemoration of Sharpeville, where the police killed 69 protesters, people that were protesting against apartheid pass laws in 1960. And so this is what this is about. Without human rights defenders, there are no human rights. The space for people to act, to express dissent, to hold accountability with public and private actors is too often met with brutality and with the misuse of force. Activists across the world are criminalized, they're detained, they're subjected to surveillance, they're threatened, they're assassinated, they're subjected to strategic lawsuits and to defamation suits as well. And as we monitor and make this information public, it becomes more and more clear the scale of this repression. Activists are brutalized by public order police and the military, by their own governments for participating in invented and invited ways, for holding state accountability for a lack of access to public services like water, sanitation, electricity. They're also brutalized and assassinated by corporate power, by extractive industries that prioritize profit over people and over human rights and the environment, by the same agencies that are destroying our planet. An average of 4 environmental rights defenders is killed every year. And this was set out in Global Witness's report for 2020. It was the worst year on record since 2012. They say in their report, Defending Tomorrow, Last Line of Defense, as the climate crisis intensifies, violence against those protecting their land and our planet also increases. It has become clear that the unaccountable exploitation and greed that drives the climate crisis is also driving violence against land and environmental defenders. So when they repress participation, whether that's invented or invited participation, governments and corporates are acting against their own laws and against international conventions and treaties, whether that participation is with local government officials or whether it's on the street. Governments are failing to protect rights, to protect defenders. In many cases, they directly perpetrate the violence, but in others, they are just complicit in that violence. The policing of protest frequently employs the excessive use of force, often carried out with impunity. States around the world, from the US to Brazil to Colombia, South Africa, Eswatini, and the Philippines, used the COVID pandemic to justify draconian measures to control citizens and to close civic space. So there are 3 crucial links that we're going to see and that are clear from the research and from the work and from the country work that we'll speak about today. The one is that the struggle for dignified, affordable water and sanitation and other essential services, and the struggle for land and environmental rights is inextricable, right? They're together. The availability of civic space and attacks on defenders is also closely linked. But not only, we see attacks on defenders increasing in countries which have supposedly open civil space, like Germany, Albania, the Netherlands, Denmark, North Macedonia, Norway. These are places where there should be space for civil society, and we're still seeing brutal attacks on protesters. I think this is, as we start to challenge entrenched economic interests, and as the government inaction against those interests becomes more and more clear from the work that monitors and civil society are doing. And then the last link is between the struggle for water justice and the struggle for environmental justice. Water justice is as deeply embedded in environmental justice as the water is in the land, as the water is in aquifers and in the streams. Like air quality, water quality is determined by the actions and the inactions of regulators, providers, authorities, polluters, by private and public actors, and by their contracted service providers. And under the custodianship of their governments. And the water and air quality that we breathe and that we drink, in the end, is defended by our defenders, by civil society organizations who stand, by people who stand against the forces of repression. It is people who act to defend both their access and the health of the environment. I have a few more things to say and then I'm going to hand over. Protesters defending water rights are met with disproportionate force by the police and by military all over the world. We saw this in Bolivia with their fight against water privatization, in Venezuela. These are where people were murdered or were injured, severely injured in protests in the last 5 years. Venezuela's water and electricity protests, India, where farmers protested poor water quality, in Dakota protesting against the oil pipeline, Morocco in 2017, in Somaliland, in Mexico, throughout Latin America, in Kyrgyzstan, in Iran just last year. As water sources around the world are threatened, more groups and communities are forced to turn to protest to defend their rights to water and to express dissent and choose to engage a tactic of protest. But state repression of protest is only one form of repression. It is also repression when activists get no response from government officials to water issues. It is also repression when they can't participate because they haven't got the right documentation, or the information is published in a different language and they can't find it. It is also repression when wealthy consumers are prioritized over poor consumers, when water throttling starts in poor areas during times of water scarcity, when democratic participation is made impossible for marginalized people, when government officials and mechanisms are inaccessible and unresponsive, when affordable services are made difficult to access because of onerous and exclusionary registration procedures. This is also repression. This is repression of the right to access water. We need to expose and tackle all forms of repression, because water rights claimers and environmental defenders are the front line, and they are also the last line of defense against climate breakdown. Even after decades of violence, people continue to stand for our land and for our planet, and in every story of defiance against corporate theft and land grabbing, against depollution, and against environmental disaster. In the end, without human rights defenders, there will be no human rights. And that is why we have convened this session today. Thank you for your time.
Wow. Thank you, Comrade Alana, for that absolutely truthful statement that if there is no activist in the front line defending, no one will defend us. We are on our own. And so we need to figure this out on our own. Without any further ado, I'm going to introduce the first speaker. And I'm going to ask the comrade to forgive me if I don't pronounce his surname properly. So it's to welcome, please welcome Emilie Pradichit. She is the founder and executive director of the Manushya Foundation. She is an intersectional feminist, visionary, and international human rights lawyer, specializing in accessing justice through strategic litigation before the UN, where her innovative work has successfully held governments and businesses accountable for the human rights abuse and violation. Manushya Foundation empowers women and youth to speak truth to power at the forefront of their fight for justice and equality across Asia. Welcome, comrade, and we're so looking forward to hear your voice. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Faeza. Thank you very much for organizing this amazing webinar. It's been wonderful sitting from Thailand to hear all the voices from Africa. I just wanted to let you know that you are so powerful. I wish that the committee members that we work with in Thailand could also join the forum. Language is an issue. They don't necessarily speak English, but they speak the same language as everyone. We all speak the language of love, and we all speak with our heart. And I would just wish that they could have seen you and hear you singing. It was so powerful. So thank you so much for your solidarity, and thank you so much for the work that you do on the ground to protect your rider rights. Thank you, and Water Poverty, for organizing this webinar and for inviting us to share our experience in Thailand. So today I'm going to share with you 2 cases that we are working on together with local communities in different regions of Thailand, where we are supporting them fighting corporate impunity and supporting them to basically protect their rights. As Alana said before, there's no human rights without human rights defenders, and you will see in the case that I will share with you that they are the ones that if they were not there in Thailand for protesting for their rights, where we are under military government, they wouldn't be able to win against the government. So I have a presentation that I would like to share with you, and I will be very brief. I hope that you can Manushya Foundation is a feminist human rights organization, and we work mainly with local communities. And our work is mainly to place the voices at the center of human rights decisions. But when we engage with them, when we fight against corporate impunity, we also use international human rights mechanism because we are working in countries where there's no civic space at all. And so there's no justice being provided by legal courts, by national courts, by national human rights institutions. So the only way that we really have to pressure the government is by using the UN. So the first case that I would like to present to you is the Justice for Pradichit case. And it's a case by which we're fighting for corporate accountability. And so the Pradichit villagers are located in central Thailand, and they are farmers. They are earning the living by farming the land and by cultivating rice as well. But in 2021, Ankara Gold Mining Resources starting the operations in Pradichit and Phetchabun provinces in central Thailand. And it has affected more than 6,000 villagers in those regions. What happened, as you can see, it's been more than 20 years that the villagers have to endure the impact of gold mining in the region. And it's important to note that Ankara Resources is a subsidiary of Australian Kingsgate, which is the mother company based in Australia. And as you know, Australia is the leading mining capitalist in the world. So they are unfortunately operating in Thailand since 2021. And in 2025, the villagers experienced the first ever water shortage because the company was using the water sources. And they also found out that the water started to become contaminated because there were toxic chemicals from the mine operations in the water. They start to find cyanide, arsenic, and manganese in the groundwater. So what happened? Due to the pollution of the water sources and the soil, the farming community could no longer farm. So they lost access to arable land, and they started to suffering also from health issues. Some of the villagers that we're working with had cancer because they were working in the mine, and some of them already died. They were also repeatedly harassed by the company and by state officials. Some of them have been arrested for trespassing the land, and also some of them have faced slap cases because they protested against the mining operations, and also because they denounced the negative health impact that the mining operations had on their lives and also on their livelihood. So they posted on Facebook, and there they were also charged for defamation by the company. So the demands of the villager were, they tried to seek justice throughout the years, through national courts, through the National Human Rights Commissions as well. In 2017, the mine was eventually closed by the Prime Minister. So from 2017 until now, there hasn't been any mining operations. But it doesn't mean that the villagers are happy, because since 2021 until now, they have never received compensation for the negative health impact, for the negative impact also on the loss of their livelihood and on the environment. So in 2016, they filed a class action lawsuit. More than 300 villagers filed a class action lawsuit against Ankara Resource Company, the company in Thailand. And only in 2019, the Civil Court of Bangkok accepted the case. And so they are demanding fair compensation, obviously, for the health issues caused by the pollution from the mine, because the water was contaminated, because of the loss of livelihood, because the land was contaminated, and also because of the pollution of the environment and loss of natural resources. But we are very worried now because just earlier this year, in January, the government of Thailand has granted 4 licenses to Kingsgate, the Australian mother company, to reopen the mine in Pradichit and Phetchabun provinces. So the villagers are fearing now that there will be further degradation of the environment and health and livelihood, because in Thailand, as many other countries in the world, there is a weak legislation when it comes to environmental impact assessment, and most of the time licenses are being approved through corruption. So it's very difficult to hold officials accountable, but also to fight for corporate accountability when you live in a country that is being governed by the military, and on top of that, you have a weak legal framework. Although the right to water is guaranteed by the Thai constitution, villagers cannot enjoy it. And you can see here that the way that the water was contaminated, as I explained earlier, it has a negative impact on the health, but also they could not farm. There was toxic leaks from the mine to the land. It appeared in 25, and the last official test that we have from the government were only conducted in 2015. Since then, there were no other examination on whether the water was still contaminated. After the closure on the mine, there was no environmental restoration that took place, and they have again never been providing any remedy. So as I explained, the right to water is guaranteed under the Thai constitution, and the government and the company think that they fulfilled the responsibility to provide water, but they did not. So the government only provided water for 1 year, only in 2007. And the water supply was only provided to 10 households out of 6,000 people affected by the water contamination. When it comes to the company, Acar Resources, supplied water to villagers only from 2008 to 2012, and they did not continue beyond 2012, and they only gave coupons to 100 people. And the coupons were not enough because it was only 20 by 20 liters of water per month, which was definitely not enough per household, and only to 100 people. So as you can see, the 6,000 villagers that were affected did not receive proper compensation, and even though the company and the government claimed that they provided them with clean and adequate water, they did not. So until today, we are still fighting for their rights, and we're still fighting for them to receive compensation. And I will explain to you at the end how we are currently trying to help them receive fair compensation. But I would like to present you another case that is happening also right now in Thailand, which is in the south of the country, and it's in the Chana area. So it's where local communities are fighting for the people and for the planet. And the movement is being led by a young woman human rights defender who is only 18 years old. She's amazing, a young Muslim feminist, and her name is Karia Ramanya. And so her and her community, the Chana community, are fighting against a governmental large-scale industrial development project in southern Thailand that will affect approximately 3,000 people. The case that I presented earlier, the contamination already happened. The case that I'm presenting right now, it has not happened yet, but the communities are fighting against it because they don't want the environment and their livelihood to be affected. So what happened? Basically, the government is building this big mega project in the Chana industry to boost the economy without very caring whether it will impact the environment and whether there will be a loss of livelihood for the communities. However, there has been a study conducted by the local government that has proved that there will be significant risk of ecological damage and that it will affect the livelihood and health of the people in the area. In March 2021, the Prime Minister last year said that the Chana Industrial Development Project will be allowed to continue to be built only if an EIA and EHIA and public hearings are being conducted. So it's the Prime Minister of Thailand, just to put you in the context, he's from the military, and he just said that to look good at the UN, and he just said that because Thailand is making a lot of pledge when it comes to COP and when it comes to receiving funding from the World Bank to mitigate climate change. So Thai officials like to make this type of claims, but with no real action being followed. And so will the EIA be enough to ensure that community rights are respected in the case of the Chana community? We don't believe so, because during COVID, when there was restriction on our movement, the government still moved ahead and did not approve the project without any public hearing. And because of the weak environmental impact assessment legislation in Thailand, there is no real guarantee that the free and prior informed consent of local communities is actually being respected. So there's, again, a real concern that the talks that are being made by the Prime Minister are just, again, to look good in front of the international community, but at the end of the day, the legal framework is so weak and the government and local governments are so corrupted that we don't believe that there will be a proper environmental impact assessment. So the communities, not believing in what the Prime Minister said, decided to protest last December in front of the government house. And they decided to protest for the project to stop. They don't want the project to be built. And again, if they did not protest it, the human rights would not be protected. And in Thailand, we are under a COVID-19 emergency decree. And the emergency decree has been going on since the beginning of 2020. And it has been extended over and over again because it gives power to the government to restrict our civic space. And so every time that young pro-democracy protesters or environmental defenders and climate defenders are protesting for democracy or against development projects to protect the land, the government is always misusing the COVID-19 emergency decree to arrest them, saying they are not allowed to protest under the emergency decree. So that's what happened on 6 December when the Shana community went to protest. And the government arrested approximately 50 people, mainly women and young people who were protesting, because mainly women and young people went to protest, thinking that by doing a peaceful protest led by women and young people, the government is not going to arrest them. They did arrest them, and 37 people were charged for violating the COVID-19 emergency decree. And the case is still ongoing because the charges have not been dropped. They kept protesting. The arrest did not stop them from protesting. And 1 week after they were arrested, the government decided to halt the project until a strategic environmental assessment is conducted, and with all stakeholders being consulted. So then the villagers decided to go back home, and they proved that no decision can be made on their behalf unless they are fairly consulted and the human rights and environmental concerns are taken into account. So we are still monitoring the case because, as I told you, the Thai government, we believe that the Thai government is acting under the pressure of the international community, and also because the Thai government has just gone through the universal periodic review, and Prayut was just coming back from Glasgow, where he made a lot of commitments during COP26. So they are just, again, trying to not lose face in front of the international community, and we are really monitoring the case to see whether or not they will still conduct a proper strategic environmental assessment with communities consulted and hearing really the concerns of local communities. The ultimate goal for the Shana community and for us would be for the project to not be built at all, because this is not even this is not good for the environment and for the climate anyway. So how would the right to water be violated? The right to be consulted has already been violated. The FPIC has already been violated. They have already been arrested for peacefully voicing the concerns. So we don't know whether a proper strategic environmental assessment will be done, but we'll see. We are still monitoring the case. So how do we support local communities fighting back, and how can we make sure that we can still fight for water rights and for the rights of human rights defenders that we're working with, environmental defenders and climate defenders, knowing that we are in a country where there's no real civic space and governed by a military government. So as I explained before, we try to amplify the voices by sending information to the UN anytime Thailand is going through a UN human rights review. Thailand just went through the universal periodic review and another review on racial discrimination just in November 2021. So it was important for us to denounce Thailand greenwashing policy and false climate solutions that are putting climate defenders and environmental defenders in jail instead of recognizing them as protectors of the forest or protectors of the environment. We also suggested through international litigation before the UN by pressuring the Thai government. And so this year we're going to send complaints on behalf of the Pradichit community and on behalf of the Shana community so that the UN special rapporteurs can pressure the Thai government and can also question the Thai government on Thailand's greenwashing policy and false climate solutions and the funding that they are receiving from international organizations such as the World Bank that are turned into false climate policies that put poor villagers and environmental and climate defenders in jail. We did pass UN submissions in the past, and we were able to ensure that villagers living in the forest were not put in jail. So we hope that we will be able to do the same for the Pradichit and Shana community. And when it comes to also alerting the international community about what is happening. For example, when the Shanghai protesters were arrested in front of the government house, what we do is that we use social media. We inform specific UN special rapporteur. In this case, we inform the
Emilie?
Yes, I'm almost done.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So sorry to...
No problem. So we directly inform the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders, for them to see, because they engage on a regular basis with the Thai government, and they always tell us that they are in dialogue with the government, but we don't see any real action to stop the Thai government. So we also call on them through social media, because we want them to also take real action and to call on the Thai government. So they do react, but we still need to see what they do in reality. We also do digital campaigns to amplify the voices of the communities that we work with. We do sub-granting, so we provide sub-grants to them so they can fight back at the national level. And we also provide know your rights and legal empowerment training and digital security training, because we want them to understand the strategic litigation before the UN, but also we want them to not face further defamation cases and criminal defamation cases and slap cases for speaking out online about the environmental impact that they are facing, especially for the Pradichit community. So that's it. Thank you so much for your attention. If you want to learn more about our work, you can follow us on our social media. And I really hope that next time in a next forum, we'll be able to bring the communities that we're working with to be able to engage directly with you in Africa, because they would love so much to hear from you, and we would love you also to hear from them. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Comrade Emilie. That was so clear, and I agree with you. Let's find ways to connect our struggle. If anything, that's what it's about, you know? How do we connect our struggles across the globe? Because it's not different. We have the same enemy. Yeah, thank you so much once again. I'm going to move on to the next speaker. We're very honored to have Comrade MacDonald Munyoro. Please forgive me if I'm saying the name wrong. Munyoro. The comrade is from Zimbabwe. He leads the National Association of Youth Organizations, NAYO, in Zimbabwe. He is a seasoned youth development worker, researcher with published work on civic space in Zimbabwe. He leads the hashtag Claim Your Water Rights campaign in Zimbabwe. He is also he's a process facilitator and presents youth in various capacities on the African continent. Welcome, comrade. Please go ahead and speak to us.
Revolutionary salutations to everyone who's joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much for introducing me. Allow me to dive into my presentation in the interest of time. I've just created some slides to help me to speak. So as already has been alluded to, I'm from Zimbabwe, and in Zimbabwe, we work in a context where there's continual shrinking of civic space, where currently the country is ranked as being repressed under the Civicus monitor. And we are also working within a context where regularly there's the introduction of new laws, administrative practice that seeks to make it very difficult for civil society organizations to organize, to push back, to demonstrate, and to also take action around issues that are pertinent to them. And within the slide, I've just tried to share some of the key processes that are happening around trying to tighten some of this space for civil society organizations within the country. A very good example is the current tabling of the Private and Voluntary Organizations PVO Amendment Bill, which is trying, for instance, to stop CSOs from political lobby and advocacy. And I'm sure for all of us being human rights defenders, we would all relate with the importance of political advocacy and lobby work, especially at the national level. And as has been alluded to already, I work for a youth organization, and in my country, young people make approximately 67.7% of the population, and most of these live in communities where they do not have access to water. And as an organization, we value their agency when it comes to claiming the right to water. There's just a pictorial picture which just shows you the kind of context under which we work, where we are living in a police state that is now increasingly becoming militarized. So in terms of the context and the work that we means, it also means that constantly we have to be shifting, to the new context. And access to clean, safe, and quality water, it remains a key challenge for both urban and rural communities in our country. Our advocacy on the right to water has been centered around the AAAQ framework, which tries to assess progress on the right to water by using the availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality contours. So I'm sure you must then be wondering and saying, we're living in a repressed country and environment. How then are the youth able to organize, to push back, and ensure that in communities where there is no water, gradually we see improvements in terms of access to water? So it finds that constitutionally, the right to demonstrate is provided for. The freedoms to association and assembly are provided for. The right to water, it's also provided for. But it becomes an issue of compliance, or maybe the rule of law, when it comes especially to the exercise of civic and political rights within the country. So in the next few slides, I'm just going to share some of the ways that we are using to organize and push back and take action within our communities. As part of the hashtag Claim Your Water Rights campaign, we launched last year what we're calling the Justice and Youth Water Hubs. These are safe spaces that we are forming at the community level that create safe spaces for young people to begin to look into their water situation, commit to take certain localized actions, to push back to push back against violations, and where it is necessary to also organize issue-based campaigns. So this is a community space. So you'd find that in the work that we do, we also try to center our advocacy and actions based on the interest and the issues that are pertinent at the local level. Another key strategy that I've also been using, given the context that we are working in, is coalescing with strategic civil society institutions to leverage on space, manage civic space, and ensure engagement with policymakers at the local and national levels. For instance, for you to undertake any protest action in our communities, you would need your activity or your event to be cleared by the police. It's not in all instances that our institution is able to get clearance. In such cases, in such instances, we leverage on other local community organizations to play a facilitatory role, which ensures that they sustained action and advocacy within the work that we do. Like in the picture that we see there, we have got a youth member from the Climate Justice and Water Hub. We also have the director for the Chitungwiza Residents Association, and there, after their protest march, they're having an interaction with the local mayor for the Chitungwiza municipality. Then, in extreme cases where we also feel that we need to put pressure, it could either be on the different arms of government. Litigation over time has also been an instrument that we have used to try and ensure that we protect the sanctity of civic space within the country. For instance, in 2018, we had several protest actions being banned, and we opted to approach the courts in Zimbabwe. We won a high court case against the Zimbabwe Republic Police, and we were given authority to undertake our demonstrations and our actions. So you'd find that through litigation, in moments where it is very difficult for civil society actors to organize, we are still able to ensure that young people have their agency and they actually demonstrate within the country. So you'd find that in the activism that we do, the exercise of freedoms to association and assembly is quite key. Then also in the work that we do, you'd find that the media is also very important, because most of what we do, if not, if not the majority of significant moments, are covered by the media. For us, we look at the media being an ally, an influencer, and a protagonist to the social struggles that young people have within our country. And some of the key struggles that they have also relate to how they access water within their communities. Because in our country, most communities access water through boreholes, through wells, and we have very few households which are still able to access on a regular basis water within their household units. So you'd find that the media is also a strategic ally and also platform and strategy that we use, where we ensure that the key moments are covered beyond the reach of some of the activities that we do. And with the advent of COVID-19, we have also had to become alive to the importance of digital activism in terms of giving voice and urgency to our youth human rights defenders. Especially, I think, during COVID-19, the government imposed several restrictions on the movement of people. And you'd find that during COVID-19, that's when the biggest spotlight was on the right to water, because then people needed water to use for different household costs. So you'd find that the magnitude of queues were significant, there were many, and the water challenge became much more significant. So through digital activism, we're able to highlight, to spotlight some of those challenges in such a way that additional boreholes were drilled in some communities, water bowsers, maybe as a temporal solution to the crisis, were also availed at regular basis to ensure that citizens have access to water. And also through digital activism, we've also been able to challenge some of the social behaviors that militate against access to water and ensuring accountability by the state at different levels of governance. In closing on my presentation, allow me to just highlight that the right to water, it remains a continual clarion call in the work that we do. And we brand this under the hashtag Claim Your Water Rights campaign, which is being coordinated under End Water Poverty. And for us, we strongly feel that until we are able to achieve the minimum standards set in the AAAQ framework, this must be a continual clarion call in the work that we do with our young people. I thank you very much. Amandla.
Wow, thank you so much, so much, Comrade MacDonald. Inspiring to hear what the youth are actually doing. And again, there's ways and such a need for us to unite our struggles globally, so that we can prepare our youth, because they are the future, and what we do, we leave to them, and there's nothing we're leaving to them at the moment. So thank you so much. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, which is my very close comrade, Ebrahiem Fourie. He's a water justice organizer for the past decade, a member of the African Water Commons Collective, which is an affiliate to the Western Cape Water Caucus and a chapter of the South African Water Caucus. Viva, Comrade Ebrahiem, viva. Lead us, come. Thank you. Yeah, Ebrahiem, you're on mute. We can't hear you, come. Workers World, we can't hear Ebrahiem, and we can't, we can see him now.
Can you hear me now?
You.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I was saying, for us in South Africa, Marikana was an eye-opener for human rights defenders. It was clear, and we saw that we are all Marikanas. And by saying that, we would also like, because the killing and the repression of human rights defenders, we see it happening all the time. So by saying that, we would like to extend a heartfelt condolences to Comrade Ayanda Ngila, Siyabonga Mankele, a heartfelt condolences to their families, their comrades, as they are the very latest victims of state repression, comrades. They are comrades that are part of Abatlale Paisum Chondolo, organization that fights for land and housing. And very recent, I'm not too sure when, I think about a week or two ago, they were assassinated by the state fighting for their rights. Comrades, I think this topic alone, for me and my experience, it was very difficult. I'm talking here today, standing in for a comrade. It was very difficult for us to get comrades to join this platform, as comrades fear to being exposed. I have seen recently a spike in attending activities where comrades are saying that they do not want to be photographed, because if these photos reach the social media platforms and they are being seen on these platforms, when they get back home where they are being targeted, comrades. For us, comrades, the form of repression in our case is the policy that the city of Cape Town, that I see a form of repression, is the policy that the city of Cape Town has passed in 2021 without our consent. We have earlier discussed this. And this policy we see as a right-out attack on the working class, as we are not going to be able to manage the water that they expect us to manage, as it is already too little. So for us, that is a right-out attack on the working class, comrades. Another form of repression, a good example, is the World Water Forum that's currently taking place, comrades, where bosses, where governments, the bosses of Pepsi, Coca-Cola, where they are coming together and taking decisions on our water, where they are making decisions on how much water is needed for the working class, how much water will they need. So they're putting a cap on our water usage. So that, for me, comrades, that is repression. They are sitting together, making decisions to repress and oppress us. Comrades, another experience in our communities with the installation of water management devices. The city of Cape Town, when these plumbers come out, they also come out with law enforcement. And this law enforcement are there to protect the private company to install that water management device. So if we refuse for it to be installed, we will be locked up. And what they do with that, comrades, they criminalize our struggles. And in that way, they legitimize the repression by criminalizing our struggles. Because now you have to stand in a court of law as a criminal, having to explain your need for water. Comrades, another thing that's happening, and I think that is very scary and that we need to look out within our communities, and I would like to share with everyone, is that this a project that was initiated by communities, the walking bus. It's communities, it's parents that initiated this project to walk children to school for their safety. What the city of Cape Town is doing, they are going to train these people as crime fighters. So these are going to be the people that's going to come with the plumbing companies to install the new conventional meter, comrades. And for me, what's so dangerous about that, it's our own people that are using to repress us. We've seen through the red ants, comrades, that when there's eviction, the people that breaks down your shacks, it's our own people that they are using for repression, comrades. That's the nature of the system, comrades. It divides us and it makes us fight with each other, not seeing who the real enemy is. For me, I just want to also say that another form, I think Alana made mention of it earlier, engagement with city, with authorities, that authoritarian decision making. It's also a form of repression. As we see now with our conventional meter, comrades, that decision was taken in the heart of COVID-19, when we were, like we said, struggling to get food onto the table. They passed that bylaw to install the conventional meter. Firstly, without our consultation, they did not consult us. There was no public participation. That is a form of repression and of oppression. Comrades, I think I would like to stop it there.
Thank you, Comrade Ebrahiem. Thank you so much. Amandla. Amandla. Forward to the struggle. Forward to the struggle for water for all. I'm sorry, comrades, I'm a bit behind here. When I say Amandla, you say I'll wait to a few minutes later, and then I'm a bit too fast. So forgive me. But anyway, I'm going to hand over to, because we're going into another part of the session. We're going to have two very important speakers, but Koni will introduce them formally, and they will speak to us. We're so looking forward to them speak to us. So I'll just hand over to Koni. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This has been the most ambitious technical leap. We have two mics because one is for the Zoom and one is for the room. So yeah, I see a river of cords amongst us. And we're looking here at a screen and here at one laptop and there at another. So thank you very much. I'll try to look into the camera. I just want to introduce our next two speakers, Kelly Gillespie and Tauriq Jenkins, both comrades of ours. Yesterday when I spoke about the fight against Amazon, Tauriq is at the forefront of that struggle. Kelly Gillespie co-leads the Anti-Repression Collective, which they're both part of, which is why we've asked them to facilitate together. Kelly is a political and legal anthropologist. Okay, sorry, let me, okay, it's mute. All right, excuse me. So Kelly is, she teaches at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa, and she works with a range of social justice movements with a particular focus on abolition and anti-repression. So welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll introduce Tauriq Jenkins at the same time. Tauriq is the chair of the Kara Restorative Justice Unit in the Center for African Studies at the University of Cape Town. He is the High Commissioner for the Gorenak-Kona Khoikhoi Traditional Council, and he is also a South African Human Rights Commissioner, very active during the lockdown in South Africa, and active with the C19 People's Coalition and part of the Anti-Repression Collective with Kelly. So Kelly and Tauriq, thank you so much. I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Koni, and thanks, comrades in Dakar, for your amazing work that you're doing there to hold back the forces of corporate greed and privatization around water. We salute you for your work, and we thank you for the space that you're holding in Dakar. So, Amandla. Amandla. Forward to people's control of water, forward. Down with corporate greed, down. Thank you, comrades, and I'm very happy to be here with you and my comrade Tauriq, who has also just come onto screen. Tauriq and I have been doing a lot of work in South Africa during the COVID-19 disaster management legislation to try and hold back the military and the police from evicting people from their homes, from engaging in extremely fascist behavior against street-based people who don't have homes. And we've seen over this last 2 years very worrying signs of an increase in police and private security repression, on top of an already extremely worrying state of the world in which we're seeing rising repression, as you've heard from many of the speakers on this panel. So my job is to give a little bit more context for being able to make sense of what we mean by repression in the current international scene right now. And then Tauriq is going to speak about a very particular experiment around people's monitoring that we've been trying to work with in South Africa, and where we would like to share some lessons and some ideas from how to proceed against repression. So we know, even though we reached the end of apartheid, even though we have all of these fancy and beautiful policy documents from the UN and from all of these international organizations that say we have goals to meet, to provide services and resources to more and more people in more and more parts of the planet, we know that the history of capitalism has been increasing inequality across the world, between countries and within countries. So we are seeing an explosion in inequality across the world. And that's not only between countries, but it's internal to countries. Inequality is growing among populations of individual countries as well. We're also seeing, with this increase in inequality, rising unemployment, or what's called underemployment. People might have jobs, but the jobs that they have are not paying them enough money to be able to survive and sustain themselves and their families. This is a condition where people are becoming more and more precarious, and less able to live viable lives. And we know that a lot of this growing inequality and rising unemployment is because of capitalism's increase in processes of privatization. And what that means is that more and more of everything in the world is becoming privately owned. And what we're speaking about today is probably the most serious part of our world that is being privatized, and that is water. It's something that we all need to be able to survive, that we all need to be able to live. And yet water is one of the resources which should be held in common, which should be held for all of us, but increasingly has been privatized. And this privatization has created profit interests at the site of more and more of our world. And so we have people who own those resources wanting to make more and more profit out of them, and we have the cost of living going up, right? So we know from going to the shops that the cost of food is going up and up and up and up and up, right? The cost of everything, the cost of rent is going up. Everything is increasing much faster than usual in terms of the cost of living. And it's becoming very difficult for people to survive this. And so as a result of this, this profit making over more and more of the resources of the world, and this increase in the cost of living, we're seeing a situation which is becoming impossible for the majority of people to live in. And that is creating the necessity for protest, right? The necessity and the incredible importance of people standing up to politicize inequality, to make inequality a political dispute, to make inequality something that needs to be fought about. Because what the corporates and what the privatizing corporates want us to do is to believe that inequality is simply natural. And we know that inequality is not a natural way to live. It's not the way we want to live with each other. And so in order to dispute, in order to resist this rising inequality, we have to protest. We have to bring our lives, our energies, our thinking to how we're going to undermine this rising inequality. But the problem about rising inequality is that it also has brought with it increasing what we call authoritarianism. So increasing need to use something like a police to make strong men, to create nationalisms, to create a feeling that some people should have the right to resources and other people shouldn't. And that in this crisis of inequality, where we're fighting over resources, this growing authoritarianism, this growing sense of who should have and who should not have across the world, is meaning that we're having a growing, escalating securitization all over the world. So more and more money is being spent on security instead of on basic resources that people need in order to survive. So you have a crisis of inequality that's growing. And that crisis of inequality, instead of saying, okay, let's make a less unequal world, let's create equality together. In order to be able to keep that inequality, growing inequality in place, the people who have the access to capital, the people who have money, are paying for security in order to keep those people who don't have access to resources and who are protesting for those resources in their place, right? You need to build security between rich people and poor people in order to keep inequality in place. And so this is exactly what we're seeing in cities, in countries, with corporations all over the world. We're seeing growing investment in security. And it's not only in policing, right? We're seeing policing budgets increase because corrupt governments are busy paying for more policing services. We're also seeing this huge explosion in private security, right? Companies and private people paying for private security to protect that privatization process, to protect private property. We're also seeing new urban forms of policing that are building policing below the national police. All of these different forms of policing. In Cape Town, Comrade Ebrahiem mentioned the law enforcement that gets sent with the water meter installers. This law enforcement is a metro level policing army that's being put in place with more and more of the city's budgets. And along with that, we're seeing the rise in a politics of hitmen, right? So using people who are in criminal networks in cities and in countries to take out and assassinate activists. So in all of these forms, new forms of urban policing, private security, hitmen, in all of those, we're seeing this, and Ebrahiem also mentioned this, we're seeing how people with access to resources, capitalists, people who are rich, are paying salaries for poor people to brutalize other poor people. This is what securitization does. It pays people who desperately need jobs to brutalize other poor people. That's what security means under this condition of inequality. And so in this crisis, we're seeing a contradiction in society that is taking increasingly violent and repressive form. And in this context, which is happening all over the world, it's extremely important that we find strategies to stop the intensification of policing. We find strategies to prevent that securitization from happening. Because we know that as more and more of the budgets go into policing and private security, we know that activists are going to be facing higher and higher measures of repression. So we have to intervene at the site of that securitization in order to make sure that we have enough space to protest, we have enough space to demand rights to resources. And I'll say one more thing before I hand over to Tauriq. What we're also seeing is how privatization, the process of privatizing resources that should be held in common, undermines democracy. How does this happen? It's a point that we don't often talk about. When water, for example, which is a resource that we should all be able to have access to, and we should all have a decision-making over democratically. We should be able to come together and have democratic decision-making about a resource that we should all share equally. When that resource is privatized, it means that the decision-making, the democratic decision-making about that resource also gets stolen from us. So it takes away our capacity to be with each other in democratic process, learning how to, remembering how to, practicing how to be in democratic decision-making with each other. So we're not only are we having resources stolen away from us collectively, we're also having our democratic right to make decisions about those resources stolen from us. We're having our democratic process stolen from us. And so what we need to do is to really find ways to help each other stand up, not only to fight inequality, but also to insist that in standing up, we are also practicing real, deep democratic process with each other. So it's not only about resisting inequality and resisting privatization, but it's also about using that resistance to open democratic space so that we can practice our democratic politics in our resistance. This is extremely important, right? Otherwise, what privatization does is it steals from us our deep knowledge of how to come together, speak with each other, and make fair democratic decisions together. So that civic space we're looking for not only has to push securitization away, but it has to do so so that we can be together and practice deep democratic process with each other. So I'm going to hand over to Tauriq, who is going to speak to us about one strategy for this process, not only of holding the repressive securitization at bay, but also to allow us to begin to open and practice this democratic space. And that is really the space of what we're calling people's monitoring, or a space of activism that is about monitoring. So I'm going to hand over to Tauriq. Thank you, comrade.
Amandla! Amandla! Thank you, comrades, and thank you very much, Comrade Kelly, for your contribution. Comrades, it's a great honor for me to be spending time together on this wonderful occasion. You know, this is the week where we talk about the importance of water in our world, and it's also a week where we talk about the importance of activism and human rights, and so you know, my humble contribution, just to add to what Comrade Kelly was alluding to, is really about the role of monitoring and activism. And as Comrade Kelly mentioned, you know, the last 2.5 years, we have been all over this continent subjected to top-down restrictions in as far as regulations are concerned in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we have seen, this has opened up an opportunity for governments to make one of two choices: whether they were going to allow the pandemic, in terms of how we are going to respond as communities and as people, into an integrated, co-designed, civil society-based interaction where we would coordinate with power how we were going to alleviate the challenges that beset us, or were they going to default to using this opportunity to upscale fascism in order to reinforce the securitization that Comrade Kelly is talking about. And as we know, in South Africa in particular, as well as other countries, we've seen how in our context, our government defaulted to an apartheid working solution of dealing with a disaster in the form of interpreting a national health disaster into a state of emergency. And the state of emergency means that the coordination, the control, as well as the rollout and the solutions are based within a security context. So immediately we saw the recruiting of the South African Army, the increase of private security companies who within the first week with dislocating homeless people in Cape Town and putting them into gulags. And here, civil society and people who could not get out of the door because of level 5 lockdown needed to come up with some creative solutions in order to fulfill their mandate as watchdog entities. And it was in these conditions that we felt, and that necessitated a particular energy to see how we could coordinate independent forms of monitoring that were linked to important statutory bodies in order for the injustices that we were seeing to be reported on and for action to be taken. So what I want to share, comrades, is that reports and data is very important when it comes to addressing the injustice as we see it. There are two roles that in a way we play. We can wear two hats. Sometimes the hats become simultaneous. The one hat is the activism hat. When we see an injustice, we immediately try to alleviate the problem in the situation as best as we can. As monitors, sometimes what is required is a slight sense of distance in order for us to report it, and then to take the objectivity of that report in a way that can be used to create longer changes and also to impact things like advocacy, legal interventions, and other forms of interventions that can help. So in our context, you know, what we did was to look at how we can sort of mobilize the need for monitors to be, one, on the ground, and two, to have a monitoring system where that data is then sent somewhere that's going to be received and that's going to be sent out nodally to where it needs to go. So in our context with the C19 People's Coalition and the Anti-Repression Working Group, there was an initiative called and is the report.org. Basically, this report.org allows anybody who is witnessing repression to lodge a complaint, and it was made data-free initially, and then at the back end of those complaints was a receiving team that would be able to choose where these reports would go, whether it would go to the South African Human Rights Commission, whether it go to the media, whether it go to an advocacy team who would be able to take up some of these situations immediately for the kind of legal action that was required. And so, you know, one of the things that we've kind of learned along the way is how, you know, we've had to build a cadre of monitors by training monitors, by basically asking all organizations that are in the space to put forward people who will be interested to be monitors. And that then becomes a very specific kind of function. And then to orientate the monitors in terms of human rights, in terms of where we are sitting internationally within an African context and locally in as far as the deployment and the utilization and the expression of human rights in as far as the key areas of intervention that we are focused in. So whether it's be anti-repression, eviction of poor working class communities, whether it's in monitoring securitization, whether it's monitoring water, then these are sort of, you know, specific sort of areas that were there. But ultimately, we were able to use WhatsApp groups, for example, of coordinating, you know, across the country. Then to be able to take these reports and archive these reports. There are three reasons why it's important to archive our reports. One, to ensure that we are able to follow up, whether it's the police service, whether it's government, whether it's the parliamentary portfolio committee, whether it's the ward councillor, whether it's the mayor, whether it's the religious body or the NGO or the entity to whom assistance is being sought, we still have that primary body of evidence that we'll be able to refer to. And also for us to take these reports that we can make our own analysis of them and not allow, for example, analysis to be taken from us and given to entities that may be able to manipulate that analysis and start changing the statistics of the extent to how how much the oppression is, or the extent to which the the violation has taken place. It's also important to look at safety, even in your WhatsApp groups, to ensure that there's a trusting relationship with our comrade partner organizations, and to be able to put in a terms of reference whereby we know that these reports are valuable, but that they also must be protected. And in particular, as comrades, we owe it to one another to look out for each other, to look out as best as we can from the dangers that Comrade Kelly has iterated, in terms of the threats, in terms of how our own communities are often divided and conquered, in as far as stopping our expression towards a better community and towards our free and proper access to the things that we have an inalienable right to. Even in the context of reporting and in the context of being monitors, it is also important for us to share a Pan-African consciousness in terms of how we do the reporting. That our reporting, in a way, enshrines these principles of human rights, especially with the communities that we are serving and the communities that we are with. And that as monitors, it is something that we have to hold very closely. So I think that what is very important is to always keep that underlining conscious objective in terms of why these reports are important. And that would also inspire in terms of the nature of the reports. For example, when we are dealing with communities that view water as part of a spiritual aspect of our African selves, as part of ritual, and that the violation against water access is not purely something based out of water and sanitation, it is important for us to include that African social ritual narrative into the reporting, because this is a way that how we can decolonize how the narrative of water is being expressed by authorities, which creates it as a being and as a soul that is that needs to be nurtured and protected, and basically not just utilized and affected. And so in terms of building a cadre of monitors, to ensure that we do give time to training, we do give time to finding out for ourselves what shapes the difference between monitoring and activism, and when at the same time those things have to happen together. Because of the one time when we engage a particular situation and we see an atrocity happening and we don't intervene because we are being monitors, then we are also perhaps being complicit in something that should be intervened with. Yet at other moments, it's sometimes very important not to become directly involved, because the objectivity of the report is so important if it's heading to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, if it's heading towards the legal case, if it's heading towards the police station, if it's there to be an affidavit for something. So we need to bear in mind the destiny of these reports, the journey where these reports are going to go, and the decisions that we are going to make to ensure that these reports are ultimately going to bring about the highest form of justice that is available. And it is to aspire to the highest form of justice that is available, I think is something that can be an inbuilt component of how we view the need for monitoring. It's not to monitor on other comrades, it's not to place oneself in a position of power, but it is actually to decentralize that power and to ensure that the disempowered with whom we are sharing this space with is going to be reported in a way that is just and that is fair. I think I'm going to stop there for now and hand back over to Comrade Kelly.
Go ahead, Koni. But you're muted. You're muted.
Am I muted?
Not anymore. Go ahead.
Okay. No, sorry. Are you jumping back in, or are you guys done? I'm just checking.
We're done.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tauriq and Kelly. There's so much to think about in terms of what it is we can do. We're going to just take one question or comment from the floor in Dakar and the floor in Cape Town. I think this whole cross-continental conversation is really an enactment of challenging the kinds of borders and mentalities that you're talking about. There's really, you know, the first person in South Africa who died under COVID-19 did not die from COVID. They died from being shot by the police for leaving their house to go look for food. So I think that the things that you're all drawing on and drawing in are so relevant and so urgent. I think the structural violence, the state violence, and then what happens when we protest. And I think the explanations about how criminalization is taking place and what can be done has been really powerful. So I think that I'll take first a comment or a question from the decentralized space in Cape Town. Comrade Ebrahiem, do you want to pass the mic to someone?
Koni.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Afternoon, everyone in Dakar.
Afternoon.
What I would like to say is that you guys have taken the words out of everyone's mouth in Cape Town, that I have to say. And seeing that the government doesn't listen to us when we stand as one person, sorry. We say that the only thing that we have, which is our power, is the numbers. In these numbers that we've come out now today, that is our power. It shows our unity. It just shows that how serious we are. The people in Dakar, the people in Thailand, everyone who has united today to talk about these issues that we are all facing, shows the people who think that they own us, that we are serious about what we are demanding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Lilo Amandla. Okay, and then we have one comrade here from Dakar. Oh, she's in Zambia and she's online on Zoom and wanted to jump in. Bubala, are you on Zoom? I'm not so sure if they're there. Does anyone in this room want to make a comment about the repression of water activists, where you are, or the kinds of responses and strategies and tools that we can be sharing? Okay, I think with that we should wrap up. It has been a long session, but I think that, you know, water is an intersectional issue, and water justice requires intersectional solutions, and we need multi-pronged strategies. So hearing today from Zimbabwe, Thailand, South Africa, people drawing in the youth, drawing in women's groups, drawing in climate activists, housing activists, water activists. We need people's monitors the same way that we need a people's forum. We need people's water voices. We need to interfere with the media, with our narratives, with education, with how we mobilize, organize, and arise. So thank you everyone for coming today. And we hope to join and continue to work together in our struggle for water justice. Thank you.